From dishwasher with no ID to restaurant owner with everything. Until the day his past knocked on the door asking for money. At 23, my family thought it would be funny to leave me stranded in another state. Let's see if he can make it back. They laughed and drove away. I never came back. 17 years later, they found me. 123 missed calls. That summer, I turned 23. It was supposed to be like any other, working at my father's auto parts store for pathetic wages, living at home because trade school wasn't practical according to Robert, my father, and being the eternal target for my golden child brother Marcus. We weren't poor exactly, but we sure as hell weren't the type who took vacations to Hawaii. So when Robert announced we were taking a family road trip to my cousin's wedding in Nevada, I should have known something was brewing beneath the surface. 4 days into that nightmare road trip, I was already regretting not fabricating some excuse to stay home. My dad and Marcus had been rotating through their favorite sport, making Christopher's life miserable. Mom Patricia would occasionally murmur, "That's enough," in that powerless voice of hers, but we all understood it was merely theater. Look, I need to paint the picture of my family dynamic. Robert wasn't just your garden variety controlling father. He was the type who'd shake you awake at 2:30 a.m. to berate you about a task you forgot, who'd dispose of your belongings if they cluttered his path, who'd been programming me to believe I was worthless since I could comprehend language. Marcus learned swiftly: either become dad's protege or become like me. Guess which route he selected. That morning, we pulled into some forgotten rest area in Nevada, middle of absolute emptiness for countless miles, just barren landscape, distant mountains, and a depressing little restroom facility with vending machines humming their monotonous tune. I'd been sleeping in the back of our burgundy Tahoe and needed to stretch my cramped legs, use the facilities. Dad and Marcus were chuckling about something while Mom was checking her lipstick in the visor mirror. I remember precisely what I was wearing: faded Nirvana t-shirt, jeans with a tear in the left knee, and these worn-out Converse I'd owned forever. I didn't grab my phone because it was charging in the vehicle. Didn't take my wallet because why would I? We were in the middle of nowhere, and I was just taking a quick bathroom break. 12 minutes. That's how long I was in that restroom, maybe less. When I emerged, squinting in the Nevada sunshine, the parking space was vacant. Our burgundy Tahoe was gone. At first, I assumed they'd relocated it, playing some juvenile prank. I circled the entire rest area. Nothing. That's the thing about betrayal from your own blood. It strikes differently than any other variety of pain. I waited 90 minutes, sitting on the concrete curb, convincing myself they were just trying to frighten me and would return. People came and went, a few shooting me curious glances. A trucker approached, asked if I was all right. I lied and said I was waiting for my girlfriend who was inside. He nodded and departed. After hour 3, I started experiencing that Arctic feeling in my stomach. They weren't returning. My initial impulse was to borrow someone's phone, call them, plead with them to come retrieve me. But as I was about to approach a mother with 2 children, something halted me. A lifetime of memories cascaded through my consciousness: every humiliation, every instance they'd laughed at my expense, every joke that was really just cruelty disguised as humor. I could practically hear them now. Marcus's voice: "Dude, I bet he's sobbing right now." My dad: "He'll figure it out if he's not as pathetic as he appears." My mom's feeble protest that wouldn't actually alter anything. So I made a decision that would reshape everything. I approached that mother and requested to use her phone, but I didn't call my family. I called information and obtained the number for the nearest shelter in Reno, about 60 miles away. Then I asked if she could possibly give me a ride into town. Told her my family had an emergency and had to leave, but were sending someone for me later. She hesitated, but I must have appeared harmless enough because she agreed. That first night at the shelter was a brutal reality check. I possessed nothing but the clothes on my back, no identification, no money, no contacts. The shelter coordinator, Dave, let me use their computer to research my cousin's address from the wedding invitation I'd glimpsed. I contemplated maybe getting to the wedding, finding my family there. But then I sat staring at the screen and thought, why? Why chase after people who literally abandoned me roadside for entertainment? Instead, I created a new email account. I researched resources for people who needed emergency ID replacement. I Googled jobs that paid cash. I constructed a plan. 3 days later, I was washing dishes at this small diner called Morning Glory. The owner, Helen, was this 60-something woman with silver-streaked auburn hair and more tattoos than you'd anticipate. I'd wandered in, asked if they needed help, told her my wallet was stolen, but I needed work. She evaluated me and said, "Dishwasher quit yesterday. You steal from me, you're finished. Start now." That's the thing about rock bottom. You can only ascend from there. For 10 days, I worked double shifts, slept at the shelter, wore donated clothing. Dave helped me initiate the process of obtaining replacement identification by contacting vital records in my home state. I established a cheap prepaid phone from Walmart with the first cash I earned. 8 days after they abandoned me, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. It was my mother, voice trembling. Where was I? Was I okay? They'd been searching everywhere. Bullshit. It was just supposed to be a joke. Double bullshit. They waited down the road for 30 minutes, came back and couldn't locate me. Triple fucking bullshit. I listened to her panic, her manufactured concern. In the background, I could hear my dad saying to tell me to stop being dramatic and get my ass to cousin Rick's. I heard Marcus laughing. "Christopher, are you there? Say something. We've been worried sick." That cold feeling in my gut was gone. Now there was just clarity. "You wanted to see if I could make it on my own," I said, my voice steadier than it had ever been when talking to them. "So watch me." I hung up. Blocked the number. Then I blocked every family number I could remember. For good measure, I went into the Verizon store the next day and changed my number completely. 34 missed calls before I changed that number. I imagined them getting more and more furious when they realized their punching bag wasn't coming back to be punched. 6 weeks later, I had my own studio apartment above a dry cleaner. It was tiny and smelled like chemical solvents constantly, but it was mine. I worked my way up to prep cook at Morning Glory, and Helen was teaching me how to properly dice onions without losing a finger. Sometimes I'd check my old email, the one my family knew. Messages accumulated from Mom. "Please come home, we're sorry." From Dad. "This childish tantrum needs to end immediately." From Marcus. "Dude, it was just a joke. Stop being such a drama queen." I never responded. Not once. That's the thing about freedom. Once you've tasted it, there's no returning to the cage. Look, I won't pretend it was effortless. Some nights I'd scroll through Instagram, see pictures of people with normal families who actually cherished each other, and I'd feel this ache that no amount of "screw them" could fill. I had nights where the loneliness felt like it would consume me entirely. Holidays were the absolute worst, but every morning I'd wake up in my crappy little apartment that reeked of dry cleaning fluid, go to my dishwashing job where nobody called me worthless, and build my life one brick at a time. 4 months after they left me at that rest stop, I checked my email one final time. There was a new message from my mom. "Your grandfather is asking about you. Please just let us know you're breathing." I closed the email, deleted the account, threw my old SIM card in the dumpster behind Morning Glory that night. Helen taught me how to make her famous lemon meringue pie, said I had good hands for baking. It was the first genuine compliment I could remember receiving in years. I never looked back. 5 years after being abandoned at that Nevada rest stop, I found myself staring at a familiar face on my Facebook feed, not because I was stalking my family's profiles. Okay, maybe I was, but because Marcus had just been tagged in a local news article back home. He'd gotten a DUI, wrapped his car around a utility pole. Nobody was hurt except the pole. The newspaper had used his high school basketball photo. He looked so young, so arrogant. Nothing like the bloated mugshot underneath. That's the thing about karma. It moves at its own pace, but it never forgets an address. By then, I'd built something resembling a life in Nevada. My crappy studio above the dry cleaner had eventually been traded for a one-bedroom with actual windows that opened. I'd worked my way up from dishwasher to line cook to assistant manager at Morning Glory. Helen still ran the place with an iron fist and a flour-dusted apron, but she'd started treating me less like a charity case and more like, I don't know, a peculiar nephew or something. My first major purchase, when I had actual savings, was a decent laptop and nothing extravagant, just enough to take online classes through the community college. Business management, basic accounting, the stuff Robert always said was for people who couldn't do real work. I'd spend my mornings at Morning Glory, afternoons studying, evenings back at work. Rinse and repeat. Look, I won't pretend I wasn't still damaged from what happened. Trust issues? More like trust subscriptions that I could cancel anytime someone got too close. I'd made exactly 3 friends in 5 years. My neighbor Doug, who played guitar in a terrible garage band and sometimes brought me homemade beer that tasted like hoppy dishwater. Helen, if she counted as a friend and not a boss. And this regular customer named Janet, who always tipped well and asked about my day like she actually cared. That changed when Sarah started coming into Morning Glory every Tuesday and Thursday like clockwork. Always ordered the same thing, Western omelet. No peppers, extra coffee. Always sat at the counter with a textbook in nursing school, I later discovered. She had this way of completely zoning out while studying, fork halfway to her mouth for minutes at a time. I started timing her once record was 8 minutes 12 seconds before she realized she was holding cold eggs. 6 months of me bringing her coffee refills before she actually looked up and saw me. I mean, really saw me. Her eyes did this thing where they widened just a little, and she said my name tag was spelled wrong. It wasn't, but it became our weird little joke. I'd wear a different wrong name every Tuesday and Thursday, Christopher. She'd point it out. I'd act surprised. Stupidest flirting in human history, but it worked. Our first date wasn't even supposed to be a date. Her study group canceled last minute. She had a reservation at this Italian place that was impossible to get into, and I happened to be wiping down the counter when she got the cancellation text. Next thing I knew, I was sitting across from her at Giuseppe's, both of us awkwardly realizing this looked exactly like a date. 8 months later, she moved into my apartment. 18 months after that, we got a slightly bigger place together, nothing fancy, just a 2-bedroom with a bathroom where the shower had actual water pressure and neighbors who didn't practice guitar solos at 3 a.m. Meanwhile, I kept tabs on my family through fake accounts. Not proud of it, but there it is. Dad's auto parts store started struggling after the AutoZone opened on the outskirts of town. Saw him ranting about it on community Facebook pages, posts getting increasingly desperate and bitter. Mom's social media became this weird shrine to family, constant throwback pictures of us all smiling, posts about missing her boys. Plural, which was rich. She'd tag Marcus, but never mention me, like I'd been erased from existence. Marcus bounced from job to job, lots of vague posting about haters and new opportunities. The classic social media smokescreen of someone whose life is circling the drain. 4 years in, Helen took me aside during inventory and told me she was thinking about opening a second location of Morning Glory on the other side of town. Asked if I'd be interested in running it. Not owning or running. Important distinction. I didn't sleep that night. Kept thinking it was some kind of test or joke. People like me didn't get opportunities like that. Robert had made sure I understood that much. That's the thing about poisonous beliefs. They stay in your system long after you've escaped the source. But I said yes, because Sarah, half asleep beside me, mumbled that I'd be stupid not to. Because Doug, through a haze of marijuana smoke when I mentioned it, said obviously, you practically run the original place already. Because Helen wasn't Robert, wasn't my family, and had never once made me feel like I was worthless. Morning Glory East opened 8 months later. Smaller than the original, different menu, my menu. I worked 100-hour weeks that first year, lost 15 pounds I couldn't afford to lose, fought with Sarah about never being home, came home to passive-aggressive post-it notes on the refrigerator more than once. But it worked. People came. People came back. The food was good. The vibe was good. We weren't getting rich, but we were making it. 6 years after being abandoned, I made enough to help Sarah with her nursing school loans. Not all of them, those things are monstrous, but enough to make a significant dent. She cried when I showed her the payment confirmation. Not movie crying with perfect mascara tears, real crying. Snotty, red-faced, hiccuping crying. I'd never felt more like a real person than in that moment. Then my grandmother died. I found out through Facebook. Mom posted this long, dramatic tribute with a million heart emojis. Grandma Rose had been the only one in the family who ever stood up to Robert, the only one who seemed to see me. She used to slip me $20 bills when no one was looking, tell me to save it for my escape. I think she meant college. Turns out it was more literal than that. I thought about going to the funeral, even looked up flights. Sarah said she'd come with me, hold my hand through the whole awful reunion. Doug offered his crappy Honda if I wanted to drive instead. Helen just shrugged and said dead people don't know if you're there or not. So do what brings you peace. I didn't go. Instead, I sent flowers. Generic sympathy arrangement. Signed the card, Christopher. No return address, no note. Just my name. The explosion on social media was immediate. Mom posting about science and reaching out from beyond. Marcus making cryptic comments about prodigal sons. Robert saying nothing publicly, but I could imagine the storm behind closed doors. 10 days later, I got a friend request from a profile I didn't recognize. Some random name, no posts, no friends. I almost deleted it until I saw the message. See, it's Uncle Rick. Your mom gave me your old email, but it bounced back. Are you okay? We've been worried. Your dad has been asking around about you. I blocked the account. That night, I had my first panic attack in 3 years, sitting on our bathroom floor at 4 a.m., trying not to wake Sarah, feeling like my lungs were collapsing, imagining Robert hunting me down, showing up at morning glory, destroying everything I'd built. Sarah found me there 2 hours later. Didn't ask questions, just sat with me, her shoulder touching mine. When I could finally breathe again, she said the simplest thing: they can't take anything from you that you don't give them. The next morning, I called a lawyer, got advice on restraining orders just in case. Tightened privacy settings on everything. Asked Helen to alert staff not to give out information about me to anyone. Practical steps. Control what you can control. 7 years to the day after being abandoned, I married Sarah. Small ceremony at a state park. Doug was my best man. Helen made the cake and cried through the whole thing, mascara running down her weathered cheeks. Sarah's large, loud family adopted me instantly, her dad making dad jokes that somehow didn't make me flinch, her mom hugging me without setting off alarm bells in my head. That's the thing about family. Sometimes it finds you when you've stopped looking. 2 weeks after the wedding, scrolling through my dummy account late at night, I saw it. A post from Robert on a community page, looking for information on my son Christopher, last known location Reno, Nevada. Family emergency. There was no emergency. I knew that much. What I didn't know was why, after 7 years of nothing, they were suddenly looking for me. So I dug deeper, created another fake account, joined the community groups from my hometown, pieced it together bit by bit. The auto parts store had closed. Their house was in foreclosure. Mom had some medical issues she was vague posting about. Marcus had moved back home after his 4th DUI. They weren't looking for me because they missed me. They were looking for me because they needed something. And you know what? For the first time in 7 years, I smiled when I thought about them. Not because I was happy about their misfortune, but because I realized something important. I didn't care anymore. I closed the laptop, crawled into bed next to my sleeping wife, and made a decision. I would keep watching from a distance, not out of hate, not out of love, but because sometimes the best revenge isn't what you do. It's what you build while they're busy destroying themselves. It started with a LinkedIn notification. 17 years after being abandoned at that Nevada rest stop, my carefully constructed life had a glitch. Someone had viewed my profile 43 times in one day. Not unusual. Recruiters do weird stuff like that all the time. What was unusual was the name. Marcus Christopher. My brother. That's the thing about the past. It's patient. It'll wait in the tall grass for years before it strikes. By then, my life looked nothing like that first year in Reno. Sarah had finished nursing school, done her specialty training, and now worked at a local family practice 4 days a week so she could be home with our kids more. We had 2, Emma, 8, and Logan, 5. The apartment above the dry cleaner had given way to a modest 4-bedroom on the outskirts of town. Nothing extravagant, but with a yard where the kids could play, and I could grow tomatoes that never quite turned out right. Morning Glory had expanded to 4 locations, still not some massive franchise or anything, but enough that I didn't have to work the line anymore except when someone called in sick. Helen had semi-retired 3 years earlier, though she still showed up unannounced to criticize the way we folded napkins. I'd made peace with my past. Or so I thought. I still kept tabs on the family from a distance, but the constant checking had faded to maybe once every few months. Last I knew, Robert and Patricia had moved to a smaller place after losing the house. Marcus had gotten married, divorced, then married again. They'd all seemingly moved on with their lives as I had with mine. The LinkedIn thing rattled me though. 17 years of silence, and now this. I mentioned it to Sarah as we were doing our regular Sunday night routine of folding laundry while half watching whatever Netflix show we were currently behind on. She paused, a mismatched sock in each hand, and asked if I was okay. I nodded, because what else could I say? That I was suddenly 23 again, stranded at a rest stop? That I could feel Robert's voice in my head calling me worthless? 4 days later, I was at Morning Glory East, the original second location, helping with inventory because our supplier had sent the wrong kind of coffee beans again. When Maya at the front called back that there was some family asking for me. My first thought was Sarah's parents, who sometimes surprised us when they were passing through. I headed out front, mental gears already shifting to how to convince them to stay for dinner. It wasn't Sarah's family. Robert looked older, grayer. His formerly imposing frame somehow diminished. Patricia's face had that pinched look that comes from years of worrying. Her hair dyed an unnatural shade of brown. And Marcus looked like Robert had at 45. Same stance, same way of taking up space. There was a woman with them I didn't recognize. Young, maybe early 20s, hanging back like she wasn't sure she belonged in this moment. Nobody spoke. The lunch rush noise seemed to fade away until all I could hear was my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. Robert broke first, said my name like a question. I nodded, because my voice had apparently gone on vacation. Look, I'd imagined this moment 1,000 different ways over 17 years. In some versions, I told them off spectacularly. In others, I was cool and distant, unbothered by their existence. In a few embarrassing late-night scenarios, we even had tearful reconciliations. Reality is always messier than imagination. I gestured to an empty table in the corner, told Maya to bring waters, sat down across from the people who had once been my family, and waited. They'd found me through that magazine article, Nevada Rising, 15 local success stories. It wasn't even a big feature, just a sidebar with a photo of me in front of Morning Glory's original location. But apparently one of Mom's friends from high school had moved to Nevada, seen it, and sent it to her with a "Isn't this your son?" message. 123 missed calls. That's how many they'd made to my old number over the years before it was disconnected. Mom had kept count. She mentioned this like it was supposed to mean something. They talked over each other. Mom about how worried they'd been. Robert about how I'd misunderstood what happened that day. Marcus awkwardly trying to act like we were old buddies catching up. The young woman of Marcus's second wife, Brittany, it turned out, just watched me with curious eyes. I let them talk. Watched them spin their version of reality where they weren't the villains. Noticed how Robert kept eyeing the restaurant, mentally calculating what it might be worth. Saw how Mom's hand trembled slightly when she reached for her water. Caught Marcus's practice charm slipping whenever he thought I wasn't looking directly at him. Finally, when they ran out of steam, I asked the only question that mattered. Why now? That's when the real story came out. In bits and pieces, between awkward silences. Robert had medical bills, heart problems, no insurance. The second house was being foreclosed on too. Marcus's business venture, something vague involving day trading, had failed spectacularly. Mom needed surgery she couldn't afford. They weren't there for reconciliation. They were there for money. I should have been angry. Should have thrown them out. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Pity. They looked so small, so desperate. These giants who had once controlled my whole world were just flawed, broken people. I invited them to dinner at my house that night. Said I needed to think, to talk to Sarah. They agreed eagerly, Robert already halfway to considering it a done deal. That afternoon was surreal. I picked Emma up from her piano lesson, helped Logan with his preschool show and tell preparation, all while texting Sarah updates about who was coming to dinner. She offered to take the kids to her sister's. I said no. I wanted them there. Wanted my family to meet my family. Dinner was beef enchiladas, my specialty that wasn't really special, just a recipe from the back of an old El Paso box that I'd tweaked over the years. Emma set the table without being asked, carefully placing forks on the wrong side until Sarah quietly corrected her. Logan insisted on wearing his Batman costume because it was Wednesday, and apparently Wednesday was now Batman Day. When the doorbell rang, I almost dropped the dish I was carrying to the table. Sarah squeezed my arm as she passed, whispered that she had my back no matter what. The kids looked up curiously, sensing something important was happening. That's the thing about moments you've dreaded. When they finally arrive, they're simultaneously worse and better than you imagined. Introductions were awkward. Robert kept calling Sarah Shannon, despite corrections. Patricia couldn't stop crying whenever she looked at the kids, which was freaking Logan out. Marcus and Brittany were the least awful, making actual efforts at normal conversation, though Marcus kept dropping hints about family helping family. After dinner, Sarah took the kids upstairs for baths and bedtime, giving me a look that clearly said text if you need extraction. Then it was just me and them, sitting in a living room that suddenly felt too small. Robert started in on the pitch. How family sticks together. How he'd always known I'd make something of myself a lie. How they just needed a little help to get back on their feet. $35,000. Just a loan, of course. I let him finish. Then I asked him if he remembered what he said to me on my 19th birthday. He looked blank. I reminded him, at least you can't disappoint me anymore once you're not legally my problem. I asked Mom if she remembered what she did when Robert threw my acceptance letter to community college in the trash. Nothing. She'd done nothing. I asked Marcus if he remembered telling my first girlfriend I was probably gay anyway when she came to the house looking for me. They squirmed, made excuses. Robert started to get that dangerous edge to his voice that used to make me shrink. But here's the thing, I wasn't shrinking anymore. I was 17 years and a million miles from that person. I went to my office, came back with an envelope, handed it to Robert. Inside was a check for $97.50. Robert looked at it, confused, asked what the hell this was supposed to be. I told him, in 2012, that was exactly what a Greyhound ticket from Reno to our hometown would have cost. The exact amount it would have taken for me to make it back home from where they abandoned me. The silence was absolute. Then Robert started shouting, called me ungrateful, selfish, said I'd always been a disappointment. The greatest hits album of my childhood, playing one last time. I didn't argue, didn't shout back, just stood up and told them it was time to leave. Mom tried a different approach. Tears, guilt. How could I do this to family? Marcus went cold. The mask of friendly brother completely dropped. Brittany just looked embarrassed for all of them. When they finally left, Robert crumpling the check and throwing it on our front step, I closed the door and leaned against it, legs suddenly shaky. Sarah came downstairs, asked if I was okay. I nodded, not trusting my voice. We cleaned up the dinner dishes in silence, checked on the sleeping kids, got ready for bed like it was any other night. As I was setting the security system, I pulled up the front door camera on my phone. They were still in the driveway, arguing. Robert gesturing wildly, Mom crying, Marcus looking at our house with an expression I recognized too well, envy mixed with hatred. Finally, they got in their rental car and drove away. I've never seen or heard from them again. Don't expect to. The chapter is closed. That's the thing about revenge. The best kind isn't something you do. It's something you live. Every happy moment with my kids. Every inside joke with Sarah. Every quiet Sunday morning with nothing to fear. Every single ordinary day in a life built on my terms. I never made it back home. I did something better. I built one.